I stood in Sister Margaret's office for the last time, watching dust particles drift through the February afternoon light. 18 years, 6,570 days behind these walls. The woman across the desk slid a manila folder toward me, her expression flat as concrete. Discharge papers, list of shelters, job listings. I opened the folder. Addresses for halfway houses, help-wanted ads for McDonald's, Walmart, gas stations. Nothing personal. No letter. No photograph. No answer to the question that had carved itself into my chest since I was old enough to understand what abandoned meant. That's it? Sister Margaret's eyes held no warmth. That's it. My hands closed around the folder's edges. $427 in my pocket, one backpack containing everything I owned, and the certainty that nobody in this world had ever wanted Lily Whitmore. The nun paused, her hand hovering over an open drawer. Something shifted in her face. Not quite sympathy, but close enough to startle me. Actually, there is one more thing. She pulled out a plastic bag, the kind used for evidence or forgotten belongings, dropped it on the desk between us. This was with you when you arrived. We were supposed to hold it until you turned 21, but the lawyer who set up the arrangement died last year. So here. I stared at the bag. Inside, a brass key lay against yellowed paper. The metal was tarnished dark, its teeth worn smooth in places. The paper had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases threatened to split. I opened the bag. The key felt heavy in my palm, deliberate. The paper held a single line of text, written in fading black ink. 47 degrees, 32 minutes, 18 seconds north. 112 degrees, 47 minutes, 52 seconds west. Coordinates. What is this? Sister Margaret was already sorting through other files, her attention elsewhere. No idea. Probably nothing. You can throw it away if you want. But my fingers had already closed around the key. Something in its weight felt purposeful. 18 years it had waited in that drawer. 18 years of patience. I left St. Anne's Orphanage at 2:15 on February 15th, 2025. My 18th birthday. Didn't look back. The key burned in my pocket like a question mark made of brass. The Greyhound station smelled like diesel and desperation. I sat on a hard plastic chair, the key in one hand, my phone in the other. I'd already typed the coordinates into Google Maps. The blue pin dropped in the middle of Montana wilderness, miles from the nearest road, surrounded by nothing but green, topographic lines indicating mountains and forest. Two choices stretched before me. Use my $427 to rent a room, find work, survive. Safe, predictable, empty. Or follow a rusted key into the mountains, chasing a ghost I'd never known. I stood up and walked to the car rental counter. The clerk looked skeptical when I asked for a truck to drive to Montana. Even more skeptical when I laid out $300 in cash, counting out 20s and 10s with shaking hands. You got credit for the deposit? No. He sucked air through his teeth. Can't rent without a card. I pushed the money closer. Please, I need to get there. Something in my voice or my face made him pause. He glanced at his manager who was absorbed in her phone, looked back at me, sighed. Ford F-150, 1998. Bring it back in one piece or I'm fired. Deal? Deal. The truck was rust brown and coughed black smoke when I turned the ignition. The interior smelled like old cigarettes and regret, but the engine was sound. That was all I needed. I spent $70 more at an Army surplus store. One-person tent, sleeping bag rated to 20 degrees, flashlight with 8 spare batteries, 6 cans of soup, 12 bottles of water. First aid kit that I hoped I wouldn't need, but suspected I might. $57 left. Enough for gas if I was careful. Nothing left for mistakes. I programmed the coordinates into my phone and pulled onto the highway at 2:45. Helena disappeared in my rearview mirror. The mountains rose ahead like teeth. The first hour was easy. Interstate 15 north, smooth asphalt cutting through valleys of stunning indifference. The landscape didn't care that I was 18 years old and completely alone. Didn't care that every mile took me further from anything resembling safety. I didn't care either. For the first time in my life, I was moving towards something instead of just away. The highway became a 2-lane road. The 2-lane road became gravel. The gravel became dirt barely wide enough for the truck. Trees pressed in from both sides, lodgepole pines so tall they blocked out chunks of sky. My phone signal died somewhere around mile marker 47. 5 o'clock. The light was already fading. Winter in Montana meant the sun gave up early. The GPS showed 8 more miles to the coordinates, but a massive fallen tree blocked the path completely. I parked the truck, killed the engine. Silence rushed in like water, broken only by wind through high branches and the distant call of something that might have been a hawk. I pulled out my backpack, loaded it with water, soup, the flashlight, first aid kit. The tent and sleeping bag strapped to the bottom. 25 pounds on my shoulders. 8 miles to walk before darkness swallowed everything. I started walking. The forest was a different world. No paths, no markers, just endless trees and undergrowth that grabbed at my jeans with thorny fingers. I climbed over rotting logs, splashed through a creek that soaked my boots, scrambled up rocky slopes using exposed roots as handholds. My phone GPS was my only guide, the blue dot crawling toward the red pin with agonizing slowness. My legs burned, my lungs ached in the thin mountain air, but I kept moving. Darkness came fast. One moment I could see the trees ahead. The next I was clicking on my flashlight and watching the beam barely penetrate the black. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 20 minutes. My breath came out in white clouds. 6:30. I covered maybe 4 miles. Exhaustion made my bones feel like lead. I found a relatively flat spot beneath a cluster of spruce trees. Pitched the tent by flashlight, my fingers clumsy with cold. The sleeping bag was thin, but better than nothing. I heated a can of soup over the camping stove and ate it straight from the can, not tasting anything. Then I lay in the tent, wrapped in the sleeping bag, listening to the forest breathe. Every crack of a branch made my heart jump. Every rustle could be a bear, or a mountain lion, or something worse. I pulled out the brass key, held it up in the flashlight beam. Someone had left this for me. Someone had written those coordinates with careful precision. Someone had wanted me to come here. But who? And why? The questions followed me into uneasy sleep. I woke to something wet and cold touching my face. Jerked upright, heart hammering, hand fumbling for the flashlight. Dawnlit filtered through the tent fabric, turning everything gray-green. And standing just outside the tent flap, visible through the mesh, was a dog. Not just any dog, an Alaskan Malamute, massive and silver white, its coat the color of fresh snow in moonlight. Amber eyes watched me with eerie intelligence. It didn't bark or growl, just stared. I unzipped the tent slowly. The dog backed up 3 steps but didn't run. It was painfully thin, ribs visible beneath its thick fur, paws muddy and torn. But its eyes held something I recognized instantly. Loneliness. "Hey," I whispered. "You lost too?" The dog's ears twitched. It took one tentative step forward. I remembered the granola bars in my backpack, pulled one out, unwrapped it with slow movements, broke off a piece and tossed it gently. The dog sniffed the food once, then devoured it in a single gulp. Its eyes locked back onto mine. I tossed another piece, closer this time. The dog crept forward, ate, waited. 20 minutes later, it sat 5 feet away, finishing the last of the granola bar from my palm. Its fur was matted but soft. A male, judging by his size. No collar, no tags. Just a survivor, like me. "You need a name." I studied his silver-white coat, the way he seemed to appear and disappear in the dappled forest light. "Ghost. That work for you?" The dog tilted his head, almost like a nod. I packed up camp, shared another granola bar with Ghost, and started walking. This time I wasn't alone. The dog moved ahead of me, weaving through trees with confidence I didn't feel. Several times he stopped and looked back, waiting for me to catch up, almost like he knew where we were going. The GPS said 4 more miles. My legs screamed protest with every step. Blisters formed on my heels, then burst, then reformed. But I kept moving. 10 o'clock. The forest opened into a small clearing choked with blackberry brambles and wild mountain laurel. Ghost stopped at the edge and looked back at me. I checked my phone. The blue dot sat directly on top of the red pin. "We're here." But there was nothing. Just undergrowth so thick I couldn't see the ground. Ghost started pawing at the brambles. His front claws scraped against something that rang metallic. My heart kicked into overdrive. I dropped to my knees and started pulling away vines and dead branches. Thorns ripped into my palms. I didn't care. Under 2 feet of accumulated growth, I found it. A door. 5 feet wide, 7 feet tall, set flush into the hillside. Painted in camouflage greens and browns, so perfect it was nearly invisible. The metal was old but solid, the hinges designed to look rusted but clean underneath. In the center of the door sat a circular lock mechanism, brass, tarnished but intact. I pulled the key from my pocket with shaking hands. The key slid into the lock like it was coming home, turned with a series of heavy clicks that echoed through the clearing. The door shifted. A soft hiss of equalizing air pressure. Then silence. I placed both hands against the cold metal and pushed. The door swung inward on silent hinges. Beyond it, a concrete stairway descended into absolute darkness. Ghost pressed against my leg, warm and solid. Real. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam revealed 42 steps going down at a steep angle. The air rising from below smelled stale, but not toxic. Cool and dry. Every instinct I developed in 18 years of institutional survival screamed at me to run. This was insane, reckless, dangerous. But I'd come too far to turn back now. I started down the stairs. Ghost followed close, his claws clicking on concrete. 42 steps. I counted each one. At the bottom, another steel door. This one had a simple handle. I pushed it open. Motion sensors detected my presence. Overhead lights flickered on with electronic hums. Fluorescent tubes coming to life, one by one, until the entire space blazed with pale, artificial light. I stood frozen, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. A laboratory. 30 feet long, 20 feet wide, concrete walls and steel beam ceiling. Along the left wall, 8 tall metal filing cabinets in military gray. Along the right wall, a long workbench holding scientific equipment, microscopes under protective covers, test tubes in wooden racks, machines whose purposes I couldn't begin to guess. In the center of the room sat a large desk made of dark wood, completely out of place in this concrete tomb. An old laptop sat on the desk, its screen dark, but its presence suggesting someone had worked here, documented things, left records. The walls were covered with maps, topographical surveys with areas circled in red marker. Photographs pinned to corkboards showing mountain streams, forests, what looked like industrial sites. On one wall, someone had created a massive timeline using string and push pins, connecting dates and events in patterns I couldn't yet decipher. But it was the corkboard directly above the computer monitor that stopped my heart. A photograph. A woman, maybe 28, standing in front of this very desk. Long, dark brown hair, gray-green eyes, heart-shaped face, white lab coat, smiling at the camera with fierce intelligence and determination. I looked at the photo, looked down at my hands, touched my own face. The woman in the photograph had my face, not similar, identical. The same slightly crooked nose, the same shape of jaw, the same widow's peak in her hairline. Written beneath the photo in neat black ink, Dr. Sarah Whitmore, lead environmental scientist. My legs stopped working. I sank into the office chair in front of the desk, my backpack sliding off my shoulders. This was my mother, not some faceless stranger who had abandoned an unwanted baby, but Dr. Sarah Whitmore, a scientist, a woman with a name and a face and a purpose, a woman who looked exactly like me. Ghost pushed his nose against my hand. I gripped his fur, needing something solid to hold on to while my world realigned itself. I forced myself to look away from the photograph and examine the corkboard more carefully. It wasn't just random papers. It was a carefully curated record. Newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. Local scientist questions mining practices, from the Helena Independent Record, dated May 2006. Concerns raised over water quality in mountain communities, from July 2006. In each article, Dr. Sarah Whitmore was quoted extensively, her words measured but damning. My hands moved on their own, pulling clippings from the board. I learned that my mother had been an environmental scientist working independently, funded by grants and private donations. She'd been investigating allegations that Cascade Mining Corporation was illegally dumping toxic waste in remote areas of Montana wilderness, taking on a corporation with vast resources and political connections. Dangerous work. I found an envelope pinned to the board, sealed, addressed in neat handwriting. To Lily, on your 18th birthday. Lily. My name. She'd known my name. My fingers trembled so badly I could barely open it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. I had to read it 3 times before the words connected to meaning. My dearest Lily, if you are reading this, it means you found the key and you followed it here, which means you are brave and determined, qualities I always hoped you would inherit from me. I need you to understand something that has haunted me every day since I made the hardest decision of my life. I did not abandon you because I didn't want you. I left you at St. Anne's because it was the only way to keep you safe. The work I do here, the evidence I am gathering, it has made me a target. Cascade Mining Corporation knows I am close to exposing them, and they have made it clear through threats and intimidation that they will stop at nothing to protect their interests. 2 weeks ago, someone broke into my apartment in Helena. Nothing was taken, but the message was clear. They can reach me anywhere. I cannot risk them reaching you. By leaving you anonymously at the orphanage, by erasing every connection between us, I am giving you the only protection I can offer, the shield of invisibility. You will grow up not knowing who I am, and that ignorance will keep you safe from the people who want to silence me. I have left you this key because I must believe, that one day it will be safe for you to know the truth. That one day the evidence I have gathered will have done its work and the threat will have passed. If that day comes, this place and everything in it is yours. My legacy and my love, hidden but never forgotten. Your mother, Sarah. I clutched the letter to my chest and sobbed. For the first time in 18 years, I understood. I hadn't been unwanted. I had been desperately, fiercely loved by a woman who had sacrificed everything, including the chance to watch her daughter grow, to protect me from darkness I was only beginning to comprehend. Ghost pressed against my leg. I wrapped my arms around his neck and cried into his silver fur until I had no tears left. Then I stood, wiped my face, and started searching. The filing cabinets lined the left wall like silent witnesses. I pulled open the first drawer with a metallic screech that echoed through the concrete chamber. Inside, manila folders arranged with obsessive precision, each labeled with dates, locations, reference codes in my mother's neat handwriting. I pulled out the first folder, dated January 2005. Inside, official permits from Cascade Mining Corporation detailing approved waste disposal methods. Environmental impact assessments painting pictures of responsible corporate stewardship. Public statements from executives assuring regulators that all operations met or exceeded federal safety standards. But paper-clipped to each official document was evidence telling a different story. Photographs, dozens of them. Remote areas of Montana wilderness where Earth had been scarred by chemical burns. Streams running in unnatural shades of orange and milky white. Dead fish floating in pools of contaminated water. Each photograph carefully labeled with GPS coordinates, dates, detailed notes describing what Sarah had observed. I pulled out folder after folder, each one building on the last. I began to see the full scope of my mother's work, not just scientific research, but documentation of systematic corporate crime. She'd spent years tracking Cascade Mining's operations, following their trucks on remote logging roads, documenting their activities in areas far from oversight or public scrutiny. The folders contained soil samples, each sealed in plastic bags with labels indicating where and when they'd been collected. Attached to each sample, laboratory analysis reports showing concentrations of arsenic, lead, mercury, industrial solvents at levels that weren't just illegal, but catastrophically dangerous. Water analysis results were even more damning. Toxic chemicals leaching into groundwater, flowing downstream into watersheds supplying drinking water to towns and communities throughout the region. I found maps with red circles marking contamination sites. Attached to these maps, population statistics and health records Sarah had painstakingly gathered. Clusters of rare cancers, birth defects, chronic illnesses in communities downstream from Cascade's dumping sites. The evidence wasn't circumstantial. It was methodical, scientific, utterly damning. The work of a trained researcher who had followed every thread, documented every connection, built a case that could not be refuted. Then I found the folder that made my hands shake. Labeled simply, Victims. Inside, 347 pages, each page dedicated to one person. Michael Torres, 8 years old. Brain tumor. Diagnosed March 2004. Died September 2004. Home address 3 miles downstream from Site 7. Jennifer Walsh, 32. Leukemia. Diagnosed November 2004. Died February 2005. Well water tested positive for industrial solvents. Emily Dawson, 6 years old. Liver cancer. Diagnosed August 2005. Died November 2005. Lived near Site 12. Page after page after page. Names, faces, ages, most of them children, all of them dead. Sarah had photographed many of these families, images of children in hospital beds, parents with hollow eyes and expressions of helpless rage. Gravestones marking lives cut impossibly short. She'd interviewed each family, documented their stories with respect and care. Understood that behind every data point was a human being, a life that mattered. 347 people. 347 reasons my mother had continued her work even when it became dangerous, even when it threatened her life. I found folders containing internal Cascade mining documents, memos and emails Sarah had somehow obtained. Executive communications showing they were fully aware of the illegal dumping, that they'd calculated the cost of proper disposal versus potential fines if caught, had deliberately chosen to break the law because it was more profitable. One memo, dated November 2006, just 2 months before I was born, discussed the Whitmore problem and mentioned the need to neutralize the threat through legal or extra-legal means. My hands clenched around the paper. My mother had known she was in danger, had known Cascade Mining was willing to destroy anyone who threatened their profits, and she had continued anyway, driven by moral courage that ultimately cost her everything. I stood in that underground laboratory, surrounded by years of meticulous evidence, and understood I wasn't just looking at scientific research. I was looking at my mother's testament, a record of truth that powerful people had tried to bury. And I knew with absolute certainty that I could not let that burial be permanent. Ghost had been exploring the bunker, nose working overtime to process scents I couldn't detect. Now he returned to my side, pressing his solid warmth against my leg, anchoring me. I opened the desk drawer, looking for anything else my mother might have left. My fingers found a wooden box in the back, medium-sized, with my name carved into the lid. For Lily. I lifted it onto the desk. The weight suggested it was full. I opened it with reverence reserved for sacred things. Inside, 247 envelopes, white, arranged chronologically, each one labeled in my mother's handwriting. To Lily, month 1 in the womb. To Lily, month 5 in the womb. To my newborn daughter, Lily. To Lily, age 1, happy birthday. To Lily, age 5, Merry Christmas. To Lily, age 10, I miss you. To Lily, age 18, if you're reading this. 247 letters, written over 18 years plus 9 months of pregnancy. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone she would miss. I opened the first envelope with shaking hands. The paper inside was thin, covered in blue ink. Month 1, I found out I'm pregnant today. I'm scared. My work makes me a target. But I'm also so happy. I don't know if I'll ever meet you, but I'm writing this so you know. I wanted you, from the very first moment. Mom. I opened another, and another. Each letter a window into who Sarah Whitmore had been. Not just a scientist fighting corruption, but a mother documenting every feeling, every hope, every dream for the daughter she might never raise. She wrote about feeling me kick for the first time, about the day I was born, most beautiful thing I ever saw, about the 6 weeks she kept me before having to let me go. Every second I memorized your face. Letter 37, written February 27th, 2007. Tomorrow I take you to St. Anne's. You're 6 weeks old, sleeping in my arms right now. I've written 210 more letters. For every birthday and Christmas until you're 18. I'll never send them. Can't risk them being traced. But they're here, waiting. So if you find this place, you'll know I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. Mom. I held the box of letters against my chest and wept again. But these tears were different. Not grief for what I'd lost, but gratitude for what I'd found. 247 times my mother had said, "I love you." 247 times she'd refused to forget me. 18 years of letters that proved I had never been unwanted. Just protected. Hidden. Loved from a distance that must have broken her heart every single day. Ghost whined softly. I looked down to find him watching me with those intelligent amber eyes, almost like he understood. She loved me, I whispered. The whole time. She loved me. The dog pressed his head against my knee. Two creatures who'd been abandoned, finding each other in the wilderness. Finding proof that sometimes love existed even when it couldn't be seen. I carefully returned the letters to their box, set it aside to take with me, then turned my attention to the rest of the bunker. The laptop on the desk looked old but ruggedized, designed for field work. When I opened it and pressed the power button, the screen flickered to life. Battery indicator showed 73%. The backup power system keeping it charged, another sign of meticulous planning. A login screen appeared, requesting a password. I thought for a moment, then typed my birth date, 011-52007. The system accepted it immediately. The desktop loaded, revealing sparse organization. Folders labeled Evidence Primary, Evidence Secondary, Legal Correspondence, Federal Contacts, and one folder simply labeled For Lily. I opened Evidence Primary first. Dozens of video files, each labeled with date and location. I clicked the first one, dated August 2006. Grainy nighttime footage, shot from a concealed position in forest. Two large tanker trucks with Cascade Mining logos pulled up to the edge of a steep ravine. In the truck's headlights, I could see men in company uniforms connecting hoses, running them to the cliff edge. Audio was muffled but audible. One man, face clearly visible, speaking to another. "Corporate wants this done by morning. Dump it all, and make sure nobody sees the trucks leaving." The footage showed thousands of gallons of dark, oily liquid being pumped directly into the ravine. My stomach turned, watching deliberate poisoning of wilderness. I opened video after video. Similar scenes repeated. In several, I recognized faces of men whose names appeared in internal memos I'd read earlier. These weren't rogue employees acting without authorization. These were systematic operations ordered from the top. I had to stop watching. My hands were shaking too badly to control the mouse. The folder labeled Legal Correspondence contained copies of letters Sarah had sent to the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. Detailed reports of contamination with supporting evidence. Formal requests for investigation. Attached to each letter, responses ranging from dismissive to hostile. Claims that Sarah's methodology was flawed, that her samples were contaminated, that her accusations were baseless and potentially libelous. Then I found the subfolder labeled Payroll Evidence. Bank records, copies of checks and wire transfers, payments from shell companies connected to Cascade Mining going to 3 state environmental regulators, 2 county commissioners, and most disturbingly, to the Office of the State Attorney General. My mother had discovered that the very people supposed to enforce environmental law were being paid to look the other way. The federal contacts folder showed Sarah had understood the state system was compromised. She'd begun reaching out to the Environmental Protection Agency and the FBI, building relationships with federal agents outside Cascade's sphere of influence. Email correspondence with an EPA investigator named Robert Morrison, an FBI agent named Catherine Wells. Both had expressed serious interest in Sarah's evidence, had begun preliminary investigations. The last email from Agent Wells was dated January 10, 2007, 4 days before my mother's final letter to me. Dr. Whitmore, your evidence is substantial enough to proceed. We are prepared to offer you federal protection while we build the case. Please respond with your current location, and we will arrange a secure meeting. There was no response from Sarah. She'd run out of time before federal help could arrive. I clicked on the folder labeled "For Lily" with dread, knowing whatever my mother had placed there was meant specifically for this moment. Inside, a single subfolder titled "The Truth About My Death." The first file was an official accident report from Montana Highway Patrol, dated January 18, 2007, describing how Dr. Sarah Whitmore had lost control of her vehicle on Highway 93 during a winter storm, her car leaving the road, plunging down a steep embankment, impact killing her instantly. The report cited poor weather conditions, icy roads, driver error. Noted no other vehicles were involved. Accident consistent with tragic but common occurrence on Montana's dangerous mountain highways. The investigating officer noted Sarah had no alcohol or drugs in her system. Vehicle showed no mechanical defects. Case closed within 48 hours. But attached to this official report was another document, handwritten by Sarah herself, dated January 17, 2007, the day before her death. I read my mother's words with growing horror. They are no longer hiding their surveillance. The black sedan follows me everywhere now, makes no attempt at discretion. Yesterday I received a phone call from a man who didn't identify himself but knew details about my daily routine. What time I left my apartment, where I bought my coffee, the route I took to the lab. He said, "Accidents happen on mountain roads, Dr. Whitmore, especially in winter. It would be a shame if you became a statistic. I have reported this to Agent Wells at the FBI, but she says it will take time to arrange protection. Time I'm not sure I have. I'm writing this as insurance, as a record of what is happening. So if something does happen to me, Lily will know it was not an accident." The next files were photographs, dozens of them, taken by Sarah from her car over 3 weeks in December 2006 and January 2007, each showing the same vehicle. A black Chevrolet Suburban with tinted windows and no front license plate. Following her at various distances on different roads, different times of day. In some photos taken at stoplights, Sarah had captured partial views of the driver, a large man wearing sunglasses and dark jacket. The final photograph chilled my blood. The same black Suburban parked directly across the street from St. Anne's Orphanage. Timestamp, January 15, 2007, 6:47 a.m. Less than 2 hours after I'd been left on the orphanage steps. They had followed Sarah there, watched her leave her baby, documented her final act of protection. And 3 days later, they had killed her. One last document in the folder, a photocopy of a witness statement that had never been included in the official accident report. A truck driver named James Morrison had called Highway Patrol the day after Sarah's death. Reported he'd been driving on Highway 93 during the storm. Had seen a black SUV driving aggressively behind a small sedan matching Sarah's vehicle description. Morrison stated the SUV had pulled alongside the sedan just before a sharp curve. Appeared to make contact, then sped away as the sedan went off the road. Morrison had stopped to call for help, but by the time emergency services arrived, the SUV was long gone. His statement had been dismissed by investigators as unreliable due to poor visibility during the storm. I sat back in the chair, my mother's journal and the evidence of murder spread before me. Sarah Whitmore had not died in an accident. She had been murdered by Cascade Mining Corporation to silence the truth. And if they learned I existed, if they discovered I'd found this bunker, they would not hesitate to do the same to me. Ghost sensed my fear. He stood and placed his massive head in my lap, warm and solid and real. I buried my hands in his fur and tried to slow my racing heart. I couldn't stay in this bunker forever. Couldn't hide in the earth like my mother's secrets. I needed to understand the current state of Cascade Mining, needed to make contact with the outside world if I was going to have any chance of exposing the truth without ending up like Sarah. But first I needed to rest, to process, to prepare. I set up my sleeping bag in the corner of the lab. Ghost curled beside me, his body heat better than any blanket. The emergency lights hummed overhead, steady and eternal. Before I slept, I opened one more letter. The last one. Written the day before Sarah died. Lily, age 18. If you find this. I'm writing this January 14th, 2007. Tomorrow I take you to St. Anne's. If you're reading this, I'm dead. But you're alive. That's all that matters. In this bunker, 247 letters I wrote you. Evidence against Cascade Mining. And the truth. They killed 347 people. I have proof. But they'll kill you too if they know you exist. So I'm erasing you. No birth certificate linking us. No trail. You'll grow up thinking nobody wanted you. That lie will save your life. But know this. I wanted you. Every single day. I love you more than justice. More than truth. More than my own life. If you ever find this, run. Don't fight them alone. But if you choose to fight, make them pay for every single one of those 347 lives. I'll be proud either way. Mom. I held the letter against my chest as sleep finally claimed me. Tomorrow I would decide, run or fight. Tonight I would rest, knowing for the first time in 18 years that I had been loved. I woke to Ghost's low growl vibrating through the concrete floor. Sat up fast, heart already racing before my brain caught up. The bunker's emergency lights cast everything in harsh fluorescent white. Nothing had changed except the quality of Ghost's tension. Hackles raised, eyes fixed on the sealed door at the top of the stairs. Someone was up there. I killed my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall, listening. Footsteps. Heavy boots on forest floor directly above us. At least 2 people, maybe 3, moving in coordinated patterns that spoke of training. They'd found the bunker. Ghost's growl deepened. I clamped my hand over his muzzle, whispering urgency into his ear. The dog understood. Went silent, but stayed coiled like a spring. The footsteps moved away, fading into distance. But they'd be back, and next time they'd come prepared. I had maybe an hour, maybe less. I grabbed my backpack and started shoving things inside with shaking hands. The hard drive from the laptop, I yanked it free without bothering to shut down properly. The box containing 247 letters. Sarah's journal, the murder evidence file. My hands hesitated over the filing cabinets. 4,000 pages of documentation. Too much to carry. I'd have to leave most of it behind and pray they didn't destroy everything. Ghost whined softly. paced to the back wall and scratched at something I'd missed in my earlier exploration. I followed his lead and found it, a seam in the concrete, almost invisible. My fingers traced the outline of a door painted to match the walls perfectly. A steel handle recessed into a shallow depression. I pulled. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing darkness beyond. Taped to the inside of the door, a small envelope labeled "Emergency Exit." Inside, a hand-drawn map showing tunnel systems, old mining shafts from the 1800s running through these mountains. Sarah had drawn a route in red ink. One tunnel connected directly to the bunker, 3 miles through the earth to emerge at an abandoned mining camp on the far side of the ridge. My mother had built an escape route, a final failsafe. I shouldered my backpack and clicked on my flashlight. Ghost went into the tunnel first, nose working the stale air. I pulled the door closed behind us and started walking into the mountain's heart. The tunnel was narrow, ceiling so low I had to duck. Walls of raw rock that wept moisture in places. The air tasted of minerals and darkness. My flashlight beam barely penetrated 10 feet ahead. Ghost moved with purpose, like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. Maybe he'd been living in these tunnels, a ghost in the mountain. Twice the main passage branched into side tunnels. Ghost refused both, continuing straight. I trusted his instincts over my own. When my light swept one of the rejected passages, I saw why. The tunnel had collapsed 50 feet in, blocked by tons of fallen rock. We walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes. My legs burned, my lungs worked hard in the thin air. But behind us, no sound of pursuit. They were searching the bunker, finding it already stripped of the most damning evidence. Ahead, Ghost stopped, looked back at me. Beyond him, I saw gray light filtering through a narrow opening. The exit. I squeezed through collapsed timbers and emerged into morning. The far side of the mountain. Pine forest stretching in every direction. No roads, no buildings, just wilderness. My phone had no signal. The GPS showed I was 3.2 miles from where I'd parked the truck. Different direction entirely. I checked the time. 7:43 a.m. I'd slept maybe 4 hours in the bunker. My body felt like I'd been awake for days. Ghost pressed against my leg, looked up with those amber eyes that saw more than I could. We need to get to the truck. Then we need help. The hike took 90 minutes. Brutal terrain, no trails. But Ghost seemed to know the way, leading me through the forest with confidence that bordered on supernatural. Maybe he'd roamed these mountains for months. Maybe he'd been waiting for someone to follow. The truck sat where I'd left it, covered in a light dusting of frost. I half expected it to be gone or sabotaged. But the engine turned over on the first try, coughing black smoke before settling into a rough idle. I programmed the GPS for Whitehall, Montana, population 1,038, the nearest town with services. 15 miles of dirt roads, then pavement. Ghost jumped into the passenger seat without being asked, settled in like he'd been riding shotgun his whole life. I drove slowly, watching the rearview mirror for black SUVs that didn't appear. The forest gave way to scrubland, then to the first signs of civilization. A fence line, a distant barn, a gravel road that became asphalt. Whitehall appeared around a curve at 9:47. Main Street lined with buildings that looked like they'd been standing since the 1950s. A diner, general store, gas station, auto repair shop. I drove past them all once, studying, looking for threats that might not be obvious. Then I saw the sign that stopped my heart. Whitmore Auto Repair, established 1982. My mother's last name. Right here. 15 miles from the bunker. I pulled into the gravel lot. The garage had 2 bays, both empty. An old Ford pickup sat off to one side, paint faded to primer gray. The building itself was weathered metal siding streaked with rust. A man emerged from inside, wiping oil-stained hands on a rag. Early 70s, white hair, lean build, like someone who'd worked with his hands all his life. He wore coveralls that had seen better decades. He looked up at my truck. Then his eyes found my face through the windshield. The rag fell from his hands. He staggered back 2 steps, catching himself against the doorframe. His lips moved, forming a single word I couldn't hear, but could read. Sarah. I killed the engine and got out slowly. Ghost stayed in the truck, watching through the window. The old man stared at me like I'd risen from a grave. His face had gone pale beneath weathered tan. One hand pressed against his chest like he was checking for a heartbeat. I'm not Sarah, I managed. My voice came out rough. But I think she was my mother. He made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob, reached out with one shaking hand, stopped himself before touching me. You're real. You're actually real. Who are you? Henry. His voice broke on the name. Henry Whitmore. Sarah was my daughter. My grandfather. Standing right here. Alive. Real. He gestured weakly toward the office. Please, come inside. The office was cluttered with decades of automotive accumulation. A desk buried under parts catalogs and invoices. A coffee pot that looked like it predated the Reagan administration. 2 mismatched chairs. Oil change reminder stickers covering one entire wall. Henry lowered himself into one chair like his legs had stopped working. I took the other. We stared at each other across 3 feet and 18 years of absence. She had a baby. He said it like he still couldn't believe it. She had you, and I never knew. She left me at St. Anne's Orphanage when I was 6 weeks old. They gave me this yesterday. I pulled out the key. It led me to a bunker in the mountains, to her research, to letters she wrote me. Henry closed his eyes. Tears leaked from the corners and tracked down his weathered face. I begged her to stop. His voice was barely audible. The investigation, the evidence gathering. I told her she was going to get herself killed, that you can't fight corporations that powerful and win. He opened his eyes, meeting mine. We had terrible arguments, said things we could never take back. The last time I saw her, she told me she would rather die standing up for truth than live on her knees in comfortable ignorance. He paused, wiped his face with the back of his hand. I was angry. Told her she was throwing her life away for nothing. Then I didn't hear from her again. What happened when she died? The police said it was an accident. Highway 93. I knew better but couldn't prove it. His hands clenched into fists on his knees. 3 days after her funeral, a man came to this shop. Lawyer representing Cascade Mining. Said the company was aware of my loss. Wanted to offer their condolences in the form of a settlement. He stood abruptly, moved to an old filing cabinet, pulled out a folder. $50,000. I opened it. Bank statements. A check dated January 24th, 2007. Deposit confirmation. He never said the words directly, but the message was clear. Take the money, stay silent, and I would be safe. If I spoke out, Henry's voice broke completely. I took their blood money and stayed quiet for 18 years. I've lived with that every single day, knowing I let my daughter's murder go unavenged because I was a coward. I reached across the desk and took his weathered hand in mine. His skin was rough as sandpaper, warm and real. You survived, and now we have a chance to finish what she started. Together. Henry gripped my hand like I might disappear.
What did you find in that bunker?
I told him everything. The 247 letters, the evidence of systematic poisoning, the 347 victims, the internal memos, the video footage, the proof that Sarah had been murdered. As I spoke, something changed in his face, the shame giving way to something harder, something that looked like purpose. I have more. He stood again, moved to an old wooden chest in the corner, pulled out a metal lockbox, opened it with a key he kept on a chain around his neck.
Inside, bundles of envelopes, maybe 50 of them, each addressed in Sarah's handwriting. To Lily, age 1. To Lily, age 5. To Lily, age 10. She gave these to me days before she died. Henry's voice steadied. Made me promise to deliver them to you when you turned 18. But she never told me where you were. Never said she'd left you at an orphanage. After her death, I searched for months. Adoption records, foster care systems. But you disappeared into bureaucracy. Eventually, I gave up. Thought I'd failed her one last time. I took the bundle. 18 more letters, bringing the total to 265. She never stopped, I whispered. Never gave up writing to me. No. Henry's jaw set in a way that reminded me of the woman in that photograph, stubborn determination running in our blood. And we won't give up either. We spent the next hour scanning documents. Henry had a high-quality scanner in his office, equipment he used for insurance work and parts catalogs. We fed page after page through it, creating digital copies. I uploaded files to 3 different cloud storage accounts using disposable email addresses, creating redundant backups that would survive even if physical evidence was destroyed. While the scanner hummed, I examined the letters Henry had kept. Read about my first steps, first words, first everything Sarah had missed but documented through sheer love and imagination. Then a sleek black Mercedes SUV pulled into the lot. New, expensive, completely out of place in this working-class town where most vehicles were practical trucks covered in mud. The woman who stepped out wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Henry's monthly income. Mid-50s, perfectly styled dark hair, the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms. She walked directly to the office, heels clicking on concrete, knocked with confidence that suggested doors always open for her. Henry glanced at me, question in his eyes. I nodded and slid the letters into my backpack, kept my hand near the zipper. The woman entered with a practiced smile, extended a manicured hand first to Henry, then to me. Henry Whitmore. And you must be Lily. I didn't take the offered hand. After a moment, she lowered it. The smile never wavered. My name is Vanessa Harding. I'm Vice President of Legal Affairs for Cascade Mining Corporation. I'm here to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. Henry's face went hard as stone. Get out of my shop. Vanessa pulled the leather folder from her briefcase, ignoring his words. I'll be direct. We are aware that you have come into possession of certain historical materials related to research conducted by Dr. Sarah Whitmore nearly 2 decades ago. She slid a document across the desk, a check already filled out, made payable to Lily Whitmore, for $2 million. This is a generous offer. It would allow you to start your life with substantial financial security. Pursue any education or career path you desire. Travel the world if you wish. Her tone remained reasonable, friendly. All we ask in return is that you sign a simple non-disclosure agreement and turn over any documents, recordings, or digital files related to your mother's research. I looked at the check, at the amount that would indeed change my life, that would erase 18 years of poverty and uncertainty. I thought about the photographs in the bunker, the poisoned streams, the dying wildlife, the health records showing clusters of cancer in communities downstream from Cascade's dumping sites. I thought about Sarah's final words, urging me to have courage to stand against those who valued profit over life. No, the research isn't for sale. Vanessa's smile disappeared like it had never existed. Her face became a mask of cold professionalism. That's disappointing, Miss Whitmore. I had hoped you would be more pragmatic than your mother. She leaned forward slightly. Sarah Whitmore made the mistake of believing that moral righteousness could overcome practical reality. And look where that idealism got her. A tragic accident on a mountain road, dying alone in the cold, leaving behind an infant daughter who grew up in an orphanage without knowing her mother's name. The threat was explicit now, the friendly veneer stripped away. Accidents run in families, Miss Whitmore. Genetic predispositions, inherited risk factors. You understand? Her eyes were ice. I would encourage you to think very carefully about what matters more to you. Pursuing justice for events that happened before you were even born, or ensuring you have a future to pursue at all. She placed a business card on the desk, collected her folder. You have 48 hours to reconsider this offer. After that, I cannot guarantee your safety, or your grandfather's. She walked out. The Mercedes pulled away with expensive quietness. Henry stood frozen, knuckles white where he gripped the desk edge. They're going to kill us. Not if we move faster than they expect. I pulled out the satellite phone I'd bought at the surplus store. My mother had federal contacts, people who believed in her work. We need to reach them before Cascade can stop us. I found the FBI contact in Sarah's files, Agent Catherine Wells. The email from January 2007 had included a phone number. I dialed it, not expecting it to still work after 18 years. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice answered, professional and alert. Wells? Agent Wells, my name is Lily Whitmore. I'm calling about Dr. Sarah Whitmore and her investigation of Cascade Mining Corporation. Silence stretched for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice had completely changed. The professional detachment replaced by intense focus. Sarah Whitmore. I haven't heard that name spoken aloud in almost 2 decades. A pause. Who are you really? And how did you get this number? I explained quickly, identifying myself as Sarah's daughter, describing the bunker and the evidence I'd found, telling her about the threats and Vanessa Harding's visit. I could hear rapid typing on a keyboard, an agent already working the case. I worked with your mother for 6 months before she died. She was the most thorough researcher I ever collaborated with, meticulous and fearless. Agent Wells's voice carried old grief. She was building a case that would have brought down Cascade Mining's entire executive structure. Then she died in what the authorities called an accident. But what I knew was murder. More typing, a mouse clicking. I tried to continue the investigation, but without her evidence, I had nothing concrete. Just allegations and suspicions. Cascade's lawyers threatened the Bureau with interference suits. My superiors killed the case. She paused. I've spent 18 years waiting for someone to finish what Sarah started, and living with the guilt that I couldn't protect her when she needed me most. I won't fail her daughter. I have everything. Videos, documents, victim files, proof they murdered her. Where are you now? I hesitated, trusting a voice on the phone with my life. Henry touched my arm, nodded. Trust her.
Whitehall, Montana, at my grandfather's auto shop. Stay there.
Don't go anywhere alone. Don't contact anyone else. I'm mobilizing a team now. Her voice went hard. Cascade Mining has political connections at state and federal levels. Vanessa Harding is known in legal circles as the cleaner because she specializes in making problems disappear. 3 journalists who tried to investigate Cascade in the past decade had their careers destroyed. One lost his job over fabricated plagiarism. Another was arrested on false drug charges. The third simply disappeared while researching in Montana and was never found. My hands went cold. So, what do we do? You have something they couldn't provide. The original evidence and Sarah's daughter as witness to human cost. If we build this right, bring in federal oversight before Cascade can stop us, we can finish what your mother started. She paused. But understand that once we go public, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same. My life was never mine to begin with. I'm taking it back. Good. I'll be in touch within 6 hours. Meanwhile, upload everything you have to secure servers. I'm sending you encrypted links now. The call ended. A text message arrived 30 seconds later with FTP credentials and upload instructions. Henry and I worked through the afternoon, scanning the remaining documents he'd kept, uploading everything to Agent Wells' servers, creating a comprehensive digital archive that would survive even if we didn't. Around 4 p.m., Henry made coffee that tasted like motor oil and regret. We sat in the cluttered office, exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination. Tell me about her, I said quietly. Not the scientist, the person. Henry smiled for the first time. She was stubborn as hell. Got that from her mother, God rest her soul. Once Sarah decided something was right, nothing could move her. He looked into his coffee like he could see the past there. Smart. Not just book smart, but wise. She understood people. Could talk to anyone, PhD researchers or truck drivers, and make them feel heard. He pulled out his wallet, showed me a photograph worn soft at the edges. A young woman, maybe 16, standing beside a Toyota with its hood up, grease on her hands and face, grinning at the camera. She loved fixing things. Cars, people, broken systems. Couldn't stand seeing something not work the way it should. Henry's voice went rough. That's what got her killed. Seeing a system that was broken and refusing to walk away. I studied the photograph, saw myself in her smile, in the set of her shoulders. I wish I'd known her. You do know her. Henry tapped the backpack containing the letters. Every word she wrote, every piece of evidence she gathered, that's who she was. Someone who loved you enough to sacrifice everything so you could live. Ghost stirred from where he'd been sleeping in the corner. Lifted his head, ears pricked. A low growl started in his chest. Henry and I both went still. Outside, the sound of a vehicle pulling into the lot. Not one vehicle, multiple. I moved to the window, kept to the side, peering out. 3 black SUVs, identical, windows tinted. They parked in a semicircle, blocking both exits from the lot. Doors opened. 6 men got out, all wearing dark clothing, all moving with military precision. Back door, Henry whispered, already moving. Now. We ran through the shop, Ghost beside us. Henry grabbed a hunting rifle from a rack on the wall, threw me the keys to his old pickup. Get to the truck, drive to the sheriff, tell them everything. Not without you. I'll slow them down, give you time. He was already heading toward the front, chambering around. Go! I burst out the back door with Ghost. The pickup was 15 feet away. keys in my shaking hand. Behind me, Henry's voice boomed through the shop. "I've got a gun and I've already called the police. Get off my property." I reached the truck, yanked the door open. Ghost leaped in. A gunshot, impossibly loud, but it came from inside the shop, Henry firing a warning shot. "The next one goes through your chest. Get out!" The engine caught on the second try. I threw it in reverse, tires spitting gravel. Two of the men appeared around the corner, saw me, started running. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it. The old truck had more power than its appearance suggested. We shot forward, clipping the bumper of one SUV. Metal screamed. I didn't slow down. Behind me, more gunshots. I couldn't tell who was firing. Main Street appeared ahead. A sheriff's cruiser was parked outside the diner. I aimed for it like a lifeline. Slammed the brakes, jumped out. Ghost stayed at my heels. The sheriff was inside, sitting at the counter with coffee and pie. Mid-50s, heavy build. The kind of swagger that came from unchallenged authority in small towns. "Sheriff, there are armed men at Whitmore Auto Repair. They're attacking my grandfather." He turned slowly, studied me with eyes that held no surprise, just cold calculation. "Armed men? At Henry's shop?" He took a deliberate sip of coffee. "That's quite a claim, young lady." "I'm not lying. They showed up with guns. Please, you have to help him." The sheriff set down his cup with careful precision. "Now, let's think about this logically. Henry Whitmore's had some trouble lately. Stress, confusion." He stood, one hand resting on his service weapon. "Sometimes old folks start seeing things that aren't there, making wild accusations about respectable companies, stirring up trouble over ancient history." My blood turned to ice. Understanding crashed over me like a wave. "You're one of them. You're on Cascade's payroll." His expression didn't change. "I'd be careful making accusations like that. Slander's a serious offense." He stepped closer. "Here's what I think happened. Henry had another one of his episodes. Started shooting at shadows. You got scared and ran. Now you're confused, upset, need medical attention for shock. I need you to do your job. My job is keeping this town safe, and that means making sure troublemakers don't upset good people with lies about accidents that happened years ago." His hand tightened on his weapon. "Maybe you should come with me to the station. Get checked out. For your own safety." I backed toward the door. Ghost pressed against my legs, hackles raised. "Stay away from me. Now don't make this difficult." I ran, back to the truck. The sheriff shouted something behind me, but I was already moving. I drove north on instinct, away from town, into the mountains where trees could hide me. My phone buzzed. Text from Agent Wells. "Team mobilizing, 4 hours out. Where are you?" I pulled over on a forest road, typed with shaking fingers. "Grandfather attacked. Sheriff compromised. Running. Don't know where safe." Her response came immediately. "Stay mobile. Don't return to bunker. They'll be watching. Find public place with witnesses. I'm sending helicopter to your coordinates. 90 minutes." I checked the map. There was a state park 20 miles north. Campground with day visitors even in winter. People. Witnesses. I started driving again. Ghost sat in the passenger seat, watching me with those amber eyes that had seen too much. "We're going to make it," I told him. Told myself. We have to. The state park appeared after 30 minutes of white-knuckle driving on winding mountain roads. A dozen cars in the lot. Families.
Hikers. Normal people doing normal things.
I parked where I could see the entrance, kept the engine running, watched for black SUVs that didn't appear.
Agent Wells called at 6:15. "Lily, talk to me. Are you hurt?" "No, but my grandfather. I don't know if he's okay. Those men at his shop." Local law enforcement just reported a disturbance at Whitmore Auto Repair. No shots fired, no injuries. Henry Whitmore claims it was a misunderstanding. Her voice went gentle. "He's protecting you, giving you time to get clear."
The sheriff's dirty. He tried to detain me.
"I know. We've been building a file on Sheriff Drummond for 2 years. Payments from shell companies, unreported income. He's part of the network." She paused. "But he's also smart enough not to touch you with witnesses around. You did the right thing getting to a public place. What happens now?" "Now you wait. Helicopter's en route. ETA 45 minutes. When it lands, you get on board. We bring you to Helena FBI field office."
You give a formal statement. We execute search warrants on Cascade Mining's offices simultaneously.
"They threatened to kill me. 48 hours, Vanessa said. Which is why we're moving tonight, before they expect us to act." Agent Wells's voice hardened. "Cascade Mining is used to having time to pressure people, to make problems disappear quietly. But we're not giving them time. We're hitting them fast and hard with the full weight of federal law enforcement."
I sat in the truck as daylight faded. Watched families pack up their picnic gear. Hikers return from trails. The ordinary rhythm of life continuing around me while my world burned.
Ghost rested his head on my lap. I stroked his silver fur and tried to keep my hands from shaking. The helicopter appeared at 7:03, descending into the parking lot with rotor wash that sent leaves and dust swirling. FBI markings clear on the side.
2 agents in tactical gear jumped out before the skids touched ground, scanned the area with professional efficiency.
One waved me forward. I grabbed my backpack and ran, Ghost beside me. The agents helped us both into the helicopter. The door slammed shut, and we were airborne before I'd even buckled in. Helena appeared below as the last light died. City lights spreading in the valley. The helicopter banked toward a building complex on the north side, landed on a rooftop pad.
Agent Catherine Wells was waiting when we descended. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, intense eyes that missed nothing.
She wore an FBI windbreaker over professional clothing. She didn't offer to shake hands, just studied my face for a long moment. "You look like her, Sarah, especially around the eyes." Her voice softened. "I failed your mother once. I won't fail you." She turned toward a door. "Come on. We have a lot of work to do and not much time."
The FBI field office smelled like industrial carpet and fluorescent urgency. Agent Wells led me through corridors lined with photographs of wanted fugitives and missing persons. Ghost stayed close, his presence the only familiar thing in this sterile federal maze. We entered a conference room, 6 agents already waiting, laptops open, phones charging. The energy of people who'd been pulled from dinner or sleep to handle something that couldn't wait. Wells gestured toward a chair at the head of the table. "Lily Whitmore, meet the team that's been chasing Cascade Mining for 3 years." A young agent with red hair and tired eyes slid a legal pad toward me. "We need everything, every detail, every document. Start from the beginning." I talked for 2 hours straight. They recorded every word, took notes, asked clarifying questions. When I mentioned the 347 victims, a female agent with gray streaks in her dark hair had to step out of the room. Came back 5 minutes later with red eyes. When I finished, Wells pulled up a map on the projector. Montana, covered in digital pins. Red for contamination sites, blue for victim clusters, yellow for Cascade facilities.
Your mother documented 23 illegal dumping sites over 4 years. We've independently verified 7 in the past 18 months.
She zoomed in on a cluster near Big Timber.
But without Sarah's complete evidence, we couldn't establish the systematic pattern, couldn't prove corporate knowledge and intent. Now you can. Now we can. Wells clicked to another screen. Organizational chart. Donovan Merrick at the top. Vanessa Harding 1 level below. Names branching out like cancer. Tomorrow morning, federal judges in 3 states will sign warrants.
We hit Cascade's Montana headquarters, their Denver corporate office, and Merrick's private residence simultaneously. The red-haired agent leaned forward. But we need you to be ready for what comes next. The arrests, the media storm, the trial. His expression was gentle, but honest. Your life becomes public property. Every detail. Your childhood at St. Anne's, Sarah's death, everything. I spent 18 years invisible. Being seen doesn't scare me anymore. Wells smiled for the first time. Good. Because tomorrow, the whole country is going to know your name. They put me in a safe house on the outskirts of Helena. Small ranch home in a residential neighborhood. 2 agents stationed outside. Ghost sprawled across the bedroom floor like a silver guardian. I couldn't sleep. Kept checking my phone for news about Henry. Wells had promised to send agents to his shop to make sure he was protected, but promises felt thin when Cascade had already shown they'd kill to keep their secrets. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Lily? Henry's voice, rough but alive. They told me you're safe. Are you okay? Those men at the shop fired 1 shot into my ceiling to scare them off. They scattered like cockroaches. He paused. FBI agents are here now, taking statements, securing the building. One of them told me what's happening tomorrow. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Don't be. His voice strengthened. Sarah fought alone, died alone. You're giving her what she never had, backup, witnesses, the full weight of the law. I heard him take a shaking breath. I'm proud of you. She'd be proud too. We talked for another 10 minutes. Nothing important. Just the sound of family bridging 18 years of silence. When we hung up, I opened my backpack, pulled out the box of letters. I'd read maybe 30 of the 265. Had been too afraid to read them all at once, afraid of drowning in the love I'd missed. But tonight, I needed her voice. I opened letter 47, written when I would have been 2 years old. My darling Lily, today you're 2. I imagine you can talk now, form sentences, express opinions. I wonder if you're stubborn like me, or gentle like my mother was. I spent today at Site 14, found 3 dead deer in a creek bed. Water tested at 62 times safe arsenic levels. Took samples, documented everything. Sometimes I wonder if this work matters. If anyone will ever care enough to stop them. Then I think of you, growing up in a world where corporations can poison children for profit and face no consequences. And I know I have to keep fighting, because you deserve better. All children deserve better. I love you, Mom. I read through the night, letter after letter, watching Sarah document not just my imagined childhood, but her own growing understanding of what she faced. The danger escalating, the threats becoming explicit. Her determination never wavering. Letter 203, written days before her death, made my vision blur. Lily, age 18. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But you're alive. That's the only math that matters. I want you to know something important. I chose you over justice.
When I had to decide between finishing this fight or protecting you, I chose you. Every time. Some might say I should have gone to the FBI sooner, should have accepted witness protection,
Should have put the case before my own life. But you were never just my life. You were my reason for fighting in the first place. So I hid you, erased our connection, let you grow up thinking you were alone. It's the only decision I don't regret. Love isn't what you say, it's what you sacrifice. And I would sacrifice everything, truth, justice, my own life, to give you a chance at yours. Don't waste it. Mom. I set the letter down, pressed my palms against my eyes, breathed through the ache. Ghost shifted closer, put his heavy head on my knee, grounded me. She died so I could live, I whispered. Now I'm going to make sure she didn't die for nothing. Morning came fast. Agent Wells arrived at 6 a.m. with coffee that tasted like burnt ambition and a folder thick with legal documents. Search warrants are signed. Teams are in position. We execute at 7:30. She spread photographs across the kitchen table. Merrick's mansion. Cascade's headquarters. Office buildings in Denver. We'll have him in custody by 9. What about Vanessa Harding? Her too. Plus 3 other executives whose names appear in Sarah's memos. Wells pulled up a photo on her tablet. A man I didn't recognize. Stuart Blackwood, VP of Operations. He signed the disposal orders. His signature is on every illegal dump authorization. My phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't know. This is Marcus Webb, Seattle Tribune. Agent Wells gave me your contact. Can we talk? I showed Wells. She nodded.
He's clean. Been investigating Cascade for years but never had the evidence to publish. He'll break the story nationally. I called him. The voice that answered was rough, like someone who'd spent decades shouting questions at people who didn't want to answer. Miss Whitmore, thank you for trusting me with this. Papers rustled in the background. I need to ask, are you prepared for what's coming? The attention.
The scrutiny. Cascade will try to destroy your credibility. They'll dig into every aspect of your life.
Let them dig. I have nothing to hide.
Good. More rustling. I'm running a story in tomorrow's edition. The Sarah Whitmore Files. How one scientist's murder covered up 347 deaths. Full documentation. Victim profiles. Internal memos. Your mother's story deserves to be told right. Can you include something? I pulled out my phone, found the photo I'd taken of Sarah at her desk. She wasn't just evidence and research. She was a person, a mother, someone who loved fiercely enough to die protecting her child. Send it to me. I'll make sure she's remembered as both the scientist and the woman. 7:25. Agent Wells's phone rang. She answered, listened, face grim. We have a problem. Merrick's mansion is empty. Looks like he fled sometime last night. She listened more. Harding's also gone. We're executing the warrants, but the primary targets have run. My stomach dropped. They knew. Someone warned them. We suspected a leak. That's why we kept the operation limited to essential personnel. Wells started barking orders into her phone. Issue bolo for Merrick and Harding. Check private airfields. Contact Border Patrol. The red-haired agent burst into the kitchen. We got movement at the Denver office. Security footage shows Blackwood entering the building 15 minutes ago. He doesn't know we're coming. Wells grabbed her jacket. Then we take who we can get. Lily, stay here. 2 agents outside. Don't open the door for anyone except federal law enforcement with ID. Wait, I want to come. Absolutely not. You're a witness, not an agent. You stay protected. My mother spent 4 years gathering evidence. She died for it.
I deserve to see this through. Wells studied me. Something shifted in her expression. Understanding, maybe. Respect. You stay in the vehicle. You don't leave the vehicle. You speak to no one.
Understood? Understood. The drive to Cascades, Montana headquarters took 20 minutes. 3 FBI SUVs in convoy. I rode with Wells and 2 other agents. Ghost had to stay at the safe house, much to his displeasure. The building appeared ahead. 3 stories of glass and steel trying to look modern and clean. A corporate face hiding industrial poison. Employees were arriving for work. Coffee cups and briefcases. Normal people with normal jobs. Most of them probably having no idea what crimes their employer committed in remote mountains. Wells's phone rang again. She answered, listened, face transforming. They caught him. Border Patrol stopped Merrick's private jet at Great Falls. He was trying to fly to Canada. She smiled like a wolf. They're bringing him back now. The convoy pulled into Cascades' parking lot. Agents poured out, moving with practiced coordination. Some headed for the front entrance. Others dispersed to cover exits. I watched from the SUV as they executed the warrant. Employees being directed outside, confusion and fear rippling through the crowd. Boxes of files being carried to waiting vehicles. Then I saw him. Stuart Blackwood, VP of Operations, being led out in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, face pale with shock. He'd signed the orders that poisoned 347 people. Now he was going to pay. An agent opened my door. Miss Whitmore, there's something inside we think you should see.
I followed her through the building, past cubicles and conference rooms that looked like any other corporate office. We took an elevator to the 3rd floor. Executive offices with mountain views and furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. She led me to a large office, nameplate on the door, Donovan Merrick, CEO. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, charity events.
Merrick shaking hands with senators and governors. The respectable face of a man who'd ordered murder. But on his desk, visible now that agents had searched it, sat a folder labeled, Whitmore Problem, Resolution. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside, surveillance photos of Sarah. Her apartment, her car, her daily routes. Photos of St. Anne's Orphanage. And a single-page document dated January 16th, 2007. 2 days before she died. Subject continues to refuse settlement. Federal contact confirmed with Agent K. Wells, FBI. Risk of exposure now critical. Recommend permanent resolution via Method 3. Vehicular accident, inclement weather cover. Execute within 48 hours. Below that, a handwritten note. Approved, DM. Donovan Merrick's initials. His authorization for murder. The agent beside me spoke quietly. This is a smoking gun. Direct evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. He's never getting out. I photographed the document with my phone, sent it to Marcus Webb, to Henry. To anyone who needed to see that Sarah's death hadn't been an accident, but a calculated execution. My phone rang immediately. Marcus Webb's voice urgent. I just got your photo. This changes everything. With Merrick's authorization in writing, we have proof of premeditated murder by a corporate executive. He paused. I'm running the story tonight. Online first, then tomorrow's print edition. The public needs to know. Do it. Let everyone see what they did to her. I spent the next 6 hours at FBI headquarters giving a formal statement. Every detail recorded. Every piece of evidence cataloged. My testimony would form the foundation of the federal case. Agent Wells sat in on the entire session. When we finished, she slid a folder across the table.
Stuart Blackwood is talking. Gave up Merrick and Harding in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's providing names, dates, bank records.
Confirming everything in Sarah's documentation, plus crimes she didn't know about. She opened the folder. Internal emails, financial records. A conspiracy that went deeper than even my mother had discovered. Cascade Mining wasn't just dumping waste. They were running a protection racket. Towns that complained got threatened. Journalists who investigated had their careers destroyed. State officials who tried to enforce regulations were either bribed or blackmailed. Wells looked at me directly. Your mother stumbled into something bigger than environmental crimes. She found systemic corruption that reaches into state government, law enforcement, even federal agencies. How many people are involved? We're still mapping the network, but based on Blackwood's testimony and your mother's files, we're looking at arrests in the dozens. Sheriff Drummond, 3 county commissioners, the state attorney general's chief of staff, corporate executives, security contractors. She pulled out another document. And we found evidence that 2 other scientists tried to investigate Cascade before Sarah. Both died in apparent accidents. One in a hiking fall in 2003, another in a house fire in 2005. My blood went cold. They've been killing people for years. Yes, and getting away with it because they controlled the investigation process at the state level. Wells leaned forward. But they made a mistake with Sarah. They didn't know she documented everything. Didn't know she'd leave it for her daughter to find. Didn't know that 18 years later, the truth would come crawling out of that bunker to destroy them. At 9 p.m., Marcus Webb's story went live on the Seattle Tribune website. Within 30 minutes, it was trending nationally. By 10 p.m., CNN, NBC, and Fox were all running segments. I watched from the safe house as my mother's face appeared on television screens, as reporters detailed her investigation, as victim families were interviewed, finally getting to tell their stories. Margaret Sullivan appeared on NBC, mother of Michael Torres, the 8-year-old who died of brain cancer. She held his photograph while she spoke. Dr. Whitmore came to see us in 2004, told us she suspected the water was poisoned. We didn't believe her, thought she was paranoid. Mrs. Sullivan's voice broke. Then Michael got sick, and she was there, took samples, documented everything, promised she'd make them pay. She looked directly at the camera. It took 18 years, but her daughter is finishing what she started. Michael's death won't be forgotten. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Is this Lily Whitmore? A woman's voice. Older. Tired. Yes. My name is Elizabeth Dawson. My daughter Emily died in 2005. She was 6 years old. Liver cancer. A pause. I saw the news. About your mother. About what you found.
I'm so sorry about Emily.
Your mother visited us right before she died, showed us her research, told us Emily's death wasn't our fault, that the company had poisoned our water and they'd pay for it. Mrs. Dawson's voice strengthened. We've been waiting 18 years for justice. Thank you for giving us that. The calls kept coming. Families who'd lost children, people who'd gotten sick, communities that had been poisoned. All of them thanking me for something Sarah had done. For evidence she'd gathered. For the fight she'd died fighting. I fell asleep sometime after midnight with my phone still ringing. Ghost curled at my feet. The weight of 347 lost lives pressing down like gravity. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later, federal courthouse in Helena, the largest case in Montana history. I walked into the building flanked by Agent Wells and 2 federal marshals. Ghost beside me, officially registered as my support animal. The media presence was overwhelming. Cameras, reporters shouting questions, protesters holding signs demanding justice. Inside, the courtroom was packed. I took my seat at the prosecution table. Across the aisle, Donovan Merrick sat in an expensive suit that couldn't hide the fact he was wearing handcuffs. Vanessa Harding sat beside him. She'd been caught trying to cross into Mexico with false documents. Her practiced composure cracked now. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Stuart Blackwood sat separately. He'd taken a plea deal, would testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for 20 years instead of life. The judge entered. Older woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too many corporate criminals walk free. But not today. The prosecutor stood. Federal Attorney Jennifer Martinez. Sharp. Relentless. She'd spent 3 weeks building an airtight case. Your Honor, the United States will prove that Cascade Mining Corporation, under the direction of CEO Donovan Merrick, engaged in systematic environmental crimes, resulting in the deaths of 347 American citizens. We will prove that when Dr. Sarah Whitmore discovered these crimes and attempted to expose them, Mr. Merrick personally authorized her murder. She pulled up the document I'd found on Merrick's desk, the smoking gun. This memorandum, in Mr. Merrick's own handwriting, orders Dr. Whitmore's assassination. Permanent resolution via Method 3. Those 4 words are a murder confession. Merrick's lawyer tried to object. The judge shut him down with a look that could freeze nitrogen. Martinez spent the next 3 hours walking through the evidence. Sarah's videos of illegal dumping, the lab reports, the victim files, internal memos discussing the cost-benefit analysis of murder versus compliance. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with 265 letters in my backpack, carried the weight of 18 years and my mother's love. The prosecutor asked me to describe finding the bunker, reading the letters, understanding what Sarah had sacrificed. I looked directly at Merrick as I answered, watched his face as I recited his crimes. My mother died because she believed truth mattered more than profit, because she couldn't stand by while children were poisoned. My voice stayed steady. You killed her to protect money, to avoid accountability. You bet that no one would care enough to finish her work. I pulled out the final letter, the one Sarah had written the day before she died. But you were wrong. She made sure someone would care. She left everything for me to find. And now the whole world knows what you are. I read the letter aloud, Sarah's words filling the courtroom when I reached the end. Love isn't what you say, it's what you sacrifice. Half the people in the gallery were crying. Merrick's face had gone gray. He whispered something to his lawyer, probably realizing for the first time that he was actually going to prison. The judge called a recess. Agent Wells met me outside the courtroom. That was perfect. The jury's going to remember every word. She checked her phone. And we just got confirmation. The grand jury indicted 12 more people based on Blackwood's testimony, including Sheriff Drummond and the state AG's chief of staff. What happens now? Now the dominoes fall. Trials, convictions. Cascade Mining is done. The company's already filed for bankruptcy. Their assets will be liquidated to pay victim compensation. She smiled. Your mother won the fight. It just took 18 years. 6 months later, I stood in a different courtroom for sentencing. Donovan Merrick, 25 years federal prison, no parole. Vanessa Harding, 25 years. Stuart Blackwood, 20 years as part of his plea agreement.
Sheriff Drummond and 8 other co-conspirators, sentences ranging from 15 to 20 years. The judge addressed Merrick directly before the marshals took him away. You ordered the murder of a scientist whose only crime was telling the truth. You poisoned communities. You killed children. All for profit. She leaned forward.
You will spend the rest of your life in prison. And I hope every day you remember the 347 people who died because of your greed. Cascade Mining Corporation was dissolved, their assets seized. $17 billion in fines and restitution, the largest environmental judgment in U.S. history. The EPA began the cleanup. The 347 families received compensation. I used my settlement to establish the Sarah Whitmore Foundation, supporting whistleblowers, funding independent research, providing legal resources to poisoned communities. Henry became board chairman. Agent Wells joined as advisor. Marcus Webb documented everything for a book. And I bought the 160 acres surrounding the bunker, built a cabin overlooking the mountains my mother had died protecting. The bunker became the Sarah Whitmore Environmental Justice Center. 1 year after the trial, we held the opening ceremony. 347 families attended. Margaret Sullivan spoke for them all. Dr. Whitmore couldn't save our children, but her daughter made sure their deaths had meaning, that justice was served. She turned to me. Thank you for finishing what your mother started. That evening, I drove to Helena, to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. The headstone read, "She died so truth could live." I knelt in the grass, placed fresh flowers. Mom, I'm 19 today. 1 year since I found your bunker, since I learned who you really were. I pulled out a letter I'd written to her. You died so I could live. Now I'm living so you won't be forgotten. So those 347 people won't be forgotten. So the next corporation that thinks profit is worth murder will remember what happened here. I stood, looked at the mountains painted gold by sunset. I love you, Mom. I always will. Ghost waited by the truck. We drove back to the cabin as stars emerged. Tomorrow I would return to the foundation, continue the work Sarah had started. Tonight I sat on the porch with Ghost beside me, opened another of her letters, let her voice guide me. I wasn't the orphan who'd left St. Anne's with nothing. I was Lily Whitmore, daughter of Dr. Sarah Whitmore, inheritor of purpose. And every day I would make sure her sacrifice wasn't wasted.